from Speed Channel and Steve's bobblehead buddy.
Dave, he'll never forgive me because I got a bobblehead from you, and Charlie never did. So he's still upset about it.
I hold it over his head all the time, Dave. It's kind of a great weapon to have.
How could that have happened? I don't understand that.
Yeah, well, I don't know. All I know is it's a good thing. I truly enjoy it. Anyhow, bobbleheads aside, so much stuff going on. I want to get your take on what Kyle Petty says on Twitter here, that John Middlebrook finally is the voice of reason in NASCAR and this whole 48 C-pillar gate thing. What is your take on this whole deal?
Well, I understand where Kyle's coming from because for a long time that was the conventional wisdom in NASCAR was if the car never made it to the track, an illegal configuration. That's what tech inspection was for. You present your car at tech inspection. NASCAR doesn't like it. They make you go back and fix it, and then when it gets on the track, it's legal. My problem with that argument is I think NASCAR changed that policy a long time ago. I mean, didn't they start confiscating cars and busting crew chiefs and penalizing people when they introduced the COT? Yeah, they did. So, it seems to me that Kyle and Kenny Wallace and a lot of other people who think that's still the way it ought to be are making about a 7 or 8 year old argument. And you may agree with them. You may think we ought to roll back the clock 7 or 8 years, but it seems disingenuous to me to think that you would ignore 7 or 8 years of precedence and judge this case based on the way it used to work before the COT.
So do you feel that what John Middlebrook did today was erroneous, that he shouldn't have overturned it?
I don't have a clue because I don't know what was wrong with the car. And I don't think most of the people weighing in on this know that either. You have a handful of people who know what was wrong with the car, if anything. So the rest of us are just filling up the Twitterverse with our uneducated opinions.
And congratulations, by the way. Congratulations for being on Twitter now.
Well, yeah, they twisted my arm.
Okay, go ahead.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, I think it's great to have things that get the fans fired up, and I think Twitter is great because it gives people the opportunity to express those opinions. But what it also does is creates this alternative universe that has very little to do with reality. Reality is NASCAR said there's something wrong with that car. Middlebrook apparently agreed. He thinks there's $100,000 worth of something wrong with that car. So the question becomes, does the penalty fit the crime? Again, I don't know the crime. I don't know what was wrong with the car. I know NASCAR didn't like it, and that's kind of the game we're really playing here. It's not like there's a black and white rule. People say, oh, there are templates. Well, car didn't have. If the Hendrick organization is to be believed, car never went to the templates. So, I don't know. It's just all part of the game, which is NASCAR, and that is NASCAR runs it the way they like, except this time, apparently, their own system kind of bit them in the backside.
Well, it did give them the ability to have a lot of people talking about NASCAR on Tuesdays from pretty much from noon until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. As, we were all... Those
60,000 people who didn't show up at Bristol Sunday apparently had something to discuss other than the price of beer and hot dogs.
Yeah. Well, that brings up another topic. Charlie and I talked about the what's wrong with Bristol, and if you compare what you saw at Bristol this week with what you saw at Bristol 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, it appears, yes, indeed, there's something broken. But I don't know that there necessarily is. If you can compare what NASCAR at Bristol is now, I don't think you can.
As a racetrack?
As a racetrack, I don't think you can say that there's anything wrong with what's there now. It's just the fact that life is different.
That was going to be my question. When you said when you look at Bristol, my question is, are you looking in the grandstands or are you looking in the racetrack? If you look in the grandstands, clearly there's something wrong. If you look at the racetrack, I don't see a thing wrong. I mean, you give me cars 3 wide on a high bank half mile, that's racing.
Yeah,
you
right.
give me a single file pole putter where the only way to pass somebody's knock them out of the way, that's just WWF. And so I guess you have to come to the conclusion that in its heyday of toughest ticket in NASCAR, something like 30% of the people that were there must have been WWF fans.
We're talking to Dave Despain from Speed TV, Speed Channel. Hey, Dave, when Bruton Smith comes out and says he might spend $1 million to fix Bristol, what's he talking about?
I presume going back to a screwed up way it used to be where they sold it out. Yeah, he's the promoter. He doesn't care what show is on the track as long as it makes the fans happy.
Yeah.
Clearly, the fans are not happy with, and I think you have to temper that argument a little bit with a certain amount of coincidence. I mean, NASCAR has tried to blame its overall downturn of the last 5 years on the economy. The reality is that the downturn started before the economy went south, but the economy has to be a huge factor when you're talking about a sport that, much as they might like to tell you it's gone beyond that, a sport that is predominantly blue-collar and an economy in which blue-collar people are not doing very well. So whatever trend started prior to the collapse of the economy has certainly been exacerbated by the fact that people cannot afford to buy $100 race tickets, never mind drive to the track at $3.50 a gallon. And I think there's no way to know how much of the Bristol problem, identifying the problem as those 60,000 empty seats, how much of the Bristol problem is because of the economy, how much of it is a general downturn in interest in NASCAR, and how much of it is the specific issue of the configuration of the track. But if Bruton changes the configuration of the track, my assumption would be that he, smart promoter who understands what his fans want, realize the fans don't want racing. They want what it used to be, which is this sort of odd demo derby.
Okay, this weekend, the IndyCar Series kicks off their new season with a new car and new engines and no Danica. Can IndyCar take away some of what NASCAR's lost, do you think, Dave? Can they get back to that level of prominence they were at one time before the original breakup?
I think it's very difficult for them to do that. And if I were Randy Bernard, I'd be tearing my hair out. You have, it's just so complicated. But the world has changed so much. The direct answer to your question is I don't see a fan who rejects NASCAR looking around and seeing IndyCar as the thing that makes them happy. Those people who didn't go to Bristol because they don't like the kind of racing that exists now are not going to buy a ticket for St. Pete. They're not even going to buy a ticket for an oval race, an oval IndyCar race. So you've got to figure out a way, it seems to me, to appeal to a young audience that really don't have a lot of preconceived notions about what IndyCar racing should be. You've got to appeal to people who have some degree of brand loyalty. The Chevy, Honda, Lotus, who cares? It's just very, very difficult. You got to find a way to convert all those people that we continue to pretend are race fans who show up at St. Pete and all those other street circuits for the party, right, and never watch another race all year. We got to figure out a way to convert them into actual race fans so that they watch the next race on TV. And I don't know how you do that. Nobody's done that in 30 years of trying. So this is not a good time to be the IndyCar promoter, in my mind. That's all the bad news. Now, all the good news is they've created a lot of buzz. They've got a new car. They've got the opportunity to have something to sell besides Danica. So you can probably spin it positively as well, and they have no choice but to do that. I just think it's a very, very long road to hoe because, let's face it, nothing's changed. It's still the Indy 500 and then whatever other races they run to justify keeping those cars alive for Memorial Day.
Well, you talk about IndyCar and trying to find party fans who will become race fans. It kind of leads me to the second question as we kind of hopscotch through series, because I like to talk to you about other series because Charlie and I don't get a chance to do it all that often. This last weekend was Sebring, the 12 hours of Sebring, a very, we'll say, limited car type, at least in P1. But by the same token, when you look at the 24 hours of Daytona, huge group of people that showed up there. Fan base was terrific there. Had probably the biggest fan base for a 24-hour race in quite some time. So is sports car racing on the rebound, or is it just a partier's heaven?
Well, I'm impressed at the turnout at Daytona, in part because I don't fully understand it. I'm not sure what they had this year. I mean, what did they have different this year? What lured all those people? I'm not sure. Sebring has had, incredible crowds forever, whether 4 or 5 manufacturers show up and have a battle or not. So, that's a phenomenon in its own right. I'd love to think that the turnout for the 24-hour Daytona, the Rolex 24, if you will, was some sort of ringing endorsement of, Daytona prototype racing, but that's a little hard for me to buy based on the crowds of all the other races. So that one is a bit of a mystery to me. To the bigger question, is there a resurgence in sports car racing? I don't think so. I like what Derek Bell said on the show Sunday night, and that is that there needs to be a single unified championship that people can understand and get behind and follow. Yep. In my mind, in sports car racing, that dictates manufacturer involvement. It absolutely, by definition, means that you have to have BMWs and Porsches and Audis and Toyotas and Nissans and, cool sports cars. That's what sports car racing is. So I'm not hugely encouraged by what I see happening in the sports car world.
Okay,
new WEC, the new World Championship is a great idea, but what do they got? They've got Audi, and because Peugeot dropped out, they've got Toyota trying to throw together some kind of a season-long, effort that's not going to be very successful, I don't think.
All right, we got about a minute left, and I wanted to ask you about the success, or what seems to be some real success in Supercross racing as far as motorcycles go. You talk about being all over Twitter. A lot of people are watching the Supercross stuff and just really enamored with the racing, not only the spectacle of it, but the quality of the racing as well.
Well, it's a terrific spectacle. The problem is that it's too dangerous. They had 4 guys potentially contending for the championship this year. They've hurt 3 of them, and they still have 6 races to go or whatever it is. So,
right.
Yeah, it's great and it's fantastic to watch, but as somebody pointed out today, when you lose control 70 feet in the air, you're going to get hurt. I'm not sure how they solved that problem, but I think the very thing that makes it successful, the fact that it's so spectacular, also makes that they're their own worst enemy because they hurt their stars. Yeah. And when you hurt your stars, you don't have stars anymore. So that's a big problem for those guys.
Well, as always, Dave, thanks so much for spending time with us. It's always a treat to talk to you. And, of course, people need to tune into Wind Tunnel every Sunday now at 8 o'clock instead of 9. I made that mistake once. I won't make it again.
My pleasure, and it's always fun talking to you guys. And I don't know if I can convince them to send that second bobblehead or not. Budget's tight.
I'm all understand that. Dave, thanks so much. We'll talk to you again.
Thanks, Dave. Dave Despain.